April 1609, an unremarkable merchant vessel lay anchored at the damp wharves of Plymouth Harbour. This vessel was the Mayflower. Before gaining its place in history, the Mayflower was merely an ordinary merchant vessel. It traversed the English Channel, sailing between England, France, and the Netherlands, transporting cargoes of wine, textiles, salted fish, and coal. Then came the 16th of September, 1620, a date that was about to go down in the books, with 102 passengers and roughly 30 crew aboard. The Mayflower eased away from Plymouth's quay and pointed her bow toward the far-off Americas. At the time, it felt like just another departure, but it would flip the ship's destiny and redraw a chunk of the world map. 66 days later, on the 21st of November, the Mayflower dropped anchor in the icy winds of North America. Worn out, but still nursing big dreams, the travelers christened their bleak landing spot Plymouth, a nod to home across the sea. Today, it's Plymouth, Massachusetts. However, this settlement was neither the first English colony in North America nor the earliest site of European landing on the continent. Why, then, does the Mayflower and its company continue to command such enduring attention? The answer lies in the group of voyagers who called themselves the Puritans. Their emergence can be traced back to the year 1517. October 31st, 1517, the town of Wittenberg in the Holy Roman Empire. A theology professor named Martin Luther posted a document titled Disputation on the Power and Efficacy of Indulgences on the door of the castle church. In this article, he argued that the church's act of selling indulgences to Christians was fraudulent. He stated bluntly, "The treasures of the indulgences are nets with which they now fish for the riches of men." At the time, the church was proclaiming, "As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs." To Martin Luther, this was a grave betrayal of God's grace. He believed that God is merciful and just, and that salvation is a gift granted by God to those who truly believe in Jesus Christ, a gift that should never be tied to money. Moreover, Luther insisted that every person should have the right to read the Bible, without having to rely on the church's interpretation. His original intention was merely to invite others to a debate. However, this article, originally written in Latin, was soon translated into German. With the aid of the emerging printing press, it spread across the European continent within 6 months. The Protestant Reformation quickly ignited a wave of change across Europe. This movement was not only a religious transformation, it became a profound social revolution. And yet, across the English Channel, in the Kingdom of England, things remained strangely quiet. The storm of reform had not yet crossed the sea. But that silence wouldn't last. In 1526, King Henry VIII had been married to Queen Catherine of Aragon for nearly 2 decades, yet their union had produced only a single surviving child, Mary, later known as Mary I. In Tudor England, no woman had ever ruled in her own right. For a young and still fragile dynasty, the absence of a male heir spelled not just uncertainty, but the potential return of dynastic conflict. Another Wars of the Roses. At the same time, Henry had fallen under the spell of a charismatic young lady-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn. His desire to make Anne his lawful queen only deepened his resolve to annul his marriage to Catherine. However, his request for annulment was met with delays and rejection from the papacy. Henry's patience wore thin, and when the church would not bend to his will, the king chose a radical path: to break from it entirely. Between 1532 and 1536, Parliament passed a series of acts that systematically dismantled papal authority in England and transferred ecclesiastical power to the Crown. Ecclesiastical Appeals Act, Act of Supremacy, Dissolution of the Monasteries, too many to list. Anne Boleyn was crowned queen. In 1533, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth I. Though her marriage would end in tragedy, its consequences echoed far beyond the royal court. What began as a personal matter of love, ambition, and dynastic pressure became a revolution. The king's defiance reshaped the religious map of England and, unwittingly, sowed the seeds for the rise of Puritanism in the century to come. In 1547, upon the death of Henry VIII, the throne passed to his son by Jane Seymour, Edward VI. At only 9 years of age, Edward was young and inexperienced, yet he was a sincere adherent of Protestantism. Guided by his Protestant advisors, he initiated a series of religious reforms, aiming to establish England firmly within the Protestant camp. However, fate proved unkind. Edward's reign lasted a mere 6 years, and he died before reaching the age of 16. The crown then fell to Henry VIII's eldest daughter, Mary I. Mary was a devout Catholic. Upon her accession, her foremost act was to repeal Edward VI's Protestant legislation and to proclaim England once again a Catholic realm. What followed was a period of severe persecution. Nearly 300 Protestants were condemned to the stake as she sought to affirm her faith through fire and blood. These actions earned her the infamous epithet, Bloody Mary. Had Mary lived longer, England might well have been restored permanently to the Catholic fold. Yet Providence decreed otherwise. Her reign lasted but 5 years, and in 1558 she died, leaving the throne to her half-sister, Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I reigned for 45 years, and she was not only one of the most astute monarchs in English history, but also a master of balancing religious conflict. Confronted with a realm fractured and on the verge of collapse over matters of faith, Elizabeth adopted a cautious via media. By enacting Act of Supremacy 1558 and Act of Uniformity, she repealed the Catholic legislation of Mary I, while refraining from fully embracing the more radical Calvinist reforms associated with Edward VI. The result was a compromise settlement. The Church of England leaned toward Protestant doctrine, yet retained many Catholic traditions in its structure and liturgy. This settlement created a framework of belief that was acceptable to the majority of her subjects. Nevertheless, the via media provoked discontent among certain groups of believers. They felt the Church of England remained burdened with Catholic symbols and rituals. Far from achieving true purity, these were the people who would later come to be known as the Puritans. During Elizabeth's reign, the Puritans divided into two factions. The mainstream Puritans sought gradual reform within the Church of England. They believed that through reason and the passage of time, the remaining vestiges of Catholicism could be removed from the Church. Others, however, were driven by a more urgent conviction. They advanced the slogan, "Reformation without tarrying." For them, the true Church was a holy fellowship of God's elect, voluntarily gathered. To remain tied to what they saw as a false church was, in their eyes, to compromise their faith. This more radical group came to be known as the Separatists. Puritans and Separatists shared a common origin. Both were deeply committed to God, and both longed for divine blessing upon their nation. Yet they diverged sharply in Ephesus. The Puritans valued community, institution, and order. The Separatists prioritized individual faith and purity, even at the cost of division. This divergence ultimately set them upon entirely different paths. In 1603, with the death of Elizabeth I, the illustrious Tudor dynasty came to an end. The throne passed to James Stuart, King of Scotland, who ascended as James I of England, inaugurating the Stuart dynasty. Unlike Elizabeth I, who often adopted a pragmatic approach to governance, James I positioned himself as a dogmatic theorist. What he introduced to England was not a spirit of reform, but rather the uncompromising doctrine of the divine right of kings. This became especially evident during the Hampton Court Conference of 1604, where James confronted the Puritans' proposals for ecclesiastical reform, as the discussion encroached upon the foundations of the episcopal hierarchy. James's irritation culminated in the well-known declaration, "No bishop, no king." This statement was not merely a moment of rhetorical outburst. It epitomized the inseparability of religious authority and monarchical sovereignty in James's political thought, and in so doing, it decisively extinguished the Puritans' lingering expectations for meaningful ecclesiastical change. Beginning in 1607, those believers known as the Separatists came to the sobering realization that their ideals could no longer find refuge on English soil. Royal edicts and relentless persecution rendered their very existence perilous, as though they were walking upon the edge of a blade. In the stillness of night, many gathered in secrecy within dimly lit homes, kindling faint candles and whispering readings from the scriptures. Each knock upon the door sent a shudder through their hearts, a reminder that faith, in that moment, demanded both devotion and defiance. Where did their future lie? They did not yet know. Yet within their hearts, a faint conviction had begun to take shape that perhaps, across the vast ocean, there existed a distant land where they might worship God in freedom. Thus begins the story of the Mayflower, a prelude to one of history's most consequential voyages. In the chapters that follow, we shall witness how they embarked upon the Mayflower and set sail toward that vast, uncharted continent of North America.